Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Another small storage related project this week. This week we're going to be changing this clamp storage to a new storage system for my clamp cabinet. Okay, let's get started. So a while ago, I decided I wanted a much better option for storing my clamps. They were absolutely everywhere. They were in cupboards, they were stuck on bits of wood. It was an absolute nightmare. And you know what they say, no good woodworker can have too many clamps. So I built this clamp unit and I'll put a link to it in the top there. It actually was a really nice project. I was very happy with how it turned out. And the actual storage unit, with the exception of occasionally catching on the top of the garage, works really well. There's an absolute ton of storage in it, as you can see. I'm very pleased with it. But the other thing is, there's lots of little bits and bobs in the garage workshop that I would like to be able to use, and I do have storage for them, but to be honest, they're not always easy to reach, you know, and at hand. So when I was doing the video last week, which I'll also put a link to on the G-clamp or the clamp storage there, I did think this feels a little bit like a sort of wasted space, and I originally just put these pieces on and one of them's already fallen off. I only double-sided taped them on, to be honest, but I did think this is a sort of underwhelming piece of space. So I thought, well, what I could potentially do is cover this in wood from top to bottom. I have got to be careful about weight. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I thought if I covered this from top to bottom with wood, I would have some more sort of storage space. Now, there's an opportunity to put lots of things on here, but I do have things that I don't use very often, but I would like to be able to have access to them. So it's things like potentially some of my screwdrivers or my spanners or my push sticks, just things where generally they're always stuck somewhere else and taking up room somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is cover this, and I've got some ideas on some little things I want to put on it to help my storage. Now, I am limited a bit because obviously the more I put on this in terms of weight, the harder it's going to be, and the harder it's going to be on the hinges and on the wheel that's on the floor. And if you remember back to the video, if you've seen it, the wheel on the bottom, which helps to slide in and out, actually doesn't always touch the floor due to the uneven nature of the garage floor. But I think I can utilise some of this space. Now, over on this wall here, I've got all of my hammers, I've got my pliers and things like that. I've got lots of little things that potentially could go on here, and then it would free up that space to allow me to put some other things on. So I'm in the sort of phase where I'm just shifting things around and changing things a little bit. And I have got some really good offcuts of MDF that I've picked up from B&Q and other places in their wood cutting bin. So I've got some wood that I know I can use for it. So what I'm going to do now is just start measuring, see how big it is, pop these off, and then we'll come up with a little plan. So the first thing I did was literally just remove everything. I just wrote the measurement down there in case I forgot it, but I just got my little pry bar, popped everything off, and we were ready to go with the next stage, which was, of course, the measuring. Okay, so I've just measured it, and rather awkwardly, the gap from edge to edge is 32.9 centimetres, just under 330 mil. So, as I said, I have got some wood that's wide enough, but it isn't unfortunately going to do the whole length. But I've got some other bits that I'm going to use to sort of fill up the bottom. I'm not going all the way to the floor either. I'm only going as far as the shelf on the bottom. So I will have a nice amount of space there, and the bit at the bottom where you're going to see sort of different bits of wood is going to be covered anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. Just a very quick shout out to the double-sided tape. As you will have seen when I just took it off there, there's quite a lot of this double-sided tape left on it, and this was Poundland double-sided sticky tape. I don't even know if they sell it anymore. I bought one roll of it thinking, oh, I'm not sure how good that'll be, but it's actually pretty good. Now, off camera, I have just tried to pull some of it off, and that just isn't happening because it's completely stuck. But I'm not too worried about it staying on there. And when I board over the top of it, obviously you won't see it anyway. So in my mind, I've got a little bit of an idea about maybe some tool storage up here, possibly one of my magnetic rails. I've got a couple, they might be too wide. And then I'm going to go for a sort of storage shelf system which I can put on there, because I've got all the space of when this opens, and at the bottom maybe I'm going to make like a little pocket potentially to put my guide rails in for my plunge saw, because I've got a couple of those now. So some really good ideas. First thing to do, let's cut the wood down, offer it up, get it right, and then I can start thinking about what I'm going to put on it. So for that, I'm going to break out the table saw, because the wood I've got has still got one factory edge on it, but the other one I'm really not sure about. So I'm going to take it out, get the table saw out, get it down to size and offer it up. So let's do that now. So the garage workshop is a very different place, as you can see, being much more organised, and it's easier to get my table saw in and out. And again, I was very careful with my table saw here and how I used it. After I'd run it through, I checked the measurements. Please note I'm not wearing gloves. Thank you for all the comments about that. I then offered it up and it was absolutely perfect, which I was really surprised about. But it was a perfect fit, which made life a lot easier. There are already a couple of pre-drilled holes in this wood that I'd done off camera, and that I just literally just hooked it up to make sure it would fit. I didn't do this all the way, I didn't screw it in all the way, but just putting that in there allowed me to make sure it was in line, and also I could then start building off of what I had on there. There was another hole I put at the bottom, which originally I didn't think was going to fit, but it did connect to the wood behind. So I had the sort of first part of the unit made. I then measured the bottom half, and again, as I said, I only took it to the bottom because I later put my pull saws on this, so I wanted to get it right. And this was the other piece of MDF I had, and again, I sort of was going to slat this wood. So I kept a bit that was the length, a complete length, from top to bottom, which was about 56, I think, 56 centimetres. So I kept one bit that was that size. Don't know what was happening here. I think my mitre saw station needs a bit of a review, because I did have to put every piece of wood in the other way up, because it just wasn't catching properly. It wasn't sort of catching the wood and cutting it evenly. It was leaving a sort of mill or two out either side, which A, was really annoying, and B, obviously it had to be perfect. So this is one of the spare bits, and I then ran it through the table saw, and this is what I was going to use to make my sort of side cabinet. I then put on and offered up the holders for my hammers. I printed these. I got the printout from Thingiverse. I just printed these out, and they'd actually been on the other wall that you don't see very often in the videos, but I wanted to reuse them all. So I just started literally by doing it around the size of the hammer. So I got a sort of mark, then I got a spirit level and drew a sort of faint line all the way across, and then that way, when I knew that when I was putting the other ones up, I'd sort of get them fairly straight. I did go for getting them straight rather than getting the hammer straight, because the way the hammer, particularly the claw hammer, sort of sits in the cradle, you know, it does look a bit like it's not, but actually that is absolutely 100% straight. So when I'd done the first one, which you can see me hooking up there, I just went on to the next one. And this one again, this was for my, I think for my pin hammer, exactly the same thing. I'm just butting it up to the line that the other one's done. And again, I did, you can see, you can't see it, I did it off camera. I have pre-drilled all of these holes with just like a small screw going through it. I didn't use a very big screw. And then I just slipped my Thor hammer in the middle of the two and fixed it on. Okay, as you can see, I've got the hammers on. This piece of wood is only temporarily installed. I drilled some holes just to sort of help fix it temporarily, and I'm going to properly drill and screw it when I'm happy with where it is. But the three hammers are there. I have got other hammers, these two, but unfortunately the plastic cradles which I printed on the 3D printer are too narrow to take the sort of girth. If they do, they're at a funny angle. So I could always move them, but to be honest with you, these hammers I don't really use as much. These are the three that I use all the time, so I think I'm happy to keep these over on the magnetic strip. Obviously now I've got a bit more space over there. So I've given myself this amount of room. I've also got some pliers which I would like to put on there as well. And in particular, I think they can fit up in between. So I'm sort of getting to this level. And then I'm going to put a sort of shelf box in there with a little strip on it. So I can put things in like my glue. One of the things I don't have is a separate place to put my sort of super glue and the glue that I use readily. I've got a glue storage on the end of my table, but it's just the things that I regularly get to. So I might be able to put my tight bond in there and a couple of other things. And obviously that would mean building something off, which I'll get to. I've then got my spanners and my spanner containers that I'd like to put on there. I've got all of my pliers, which could fit on here. So quite a lot of stuff that I can put on. So I'm just going to start putting them on. But a couple of things that I'm actually going to build onto here. Like in particular, like just a little drawer, because I think it'll be really important to have the ability to do that. And how I intend to do that is to make them, get them ready, offer them up, and then obviously I can take all of this off, take this off, and then attach it to it before reattaching it. So just a case of marking it out now and keep on adding it. So the next thing I'm going to put in, I think, are my pliers, which I know will sort of fit in between here, and then we can look at making the shelf to go here. The next thing to attach with the sort of 3D printed plier holders, it works brilliantly for one set of my pliers, but not so good for the other one. But I think that's to do with the shape of the pliers. The only way I can get the plier to fit is to pop off the sort of safety screw, which I sort of don't really want to do. I want to keep it intact. But as you can see, they fitted, and that one I just kept it a little bit higher initially than I wanted it to be, but it all fits in nicely and there is plenty of space to get bits out. So I then went back to the table saw and then I started cutting the other piece of timber, and this was to make the sort of little hanging tray type thing that I've built to put my wood glue and stuff on. Again, really happy with the cuts, and I was just checking every single measurement, and I did that all the way through the build. So I got the sort of side done, as it were, and cut it into 2 equal spaces, which is what you can see there. And I'd already pre-cut the bottom, so I just sort of wanted to screw it. Sorry, I wasn't too fussed about the glue. Now here I actually made a mistake, which you won't see until the end. I'd planned to do it this way, so that drilling it would be a lot easier rather than the side. But of course I'd measured it as if it was being fit on the side. So when this actual tray, and you'll see in a minute, when it gets installed, it's not really edge to edge. It's out by 12 mil either side. But to be honest, that didn't really worry me. I then started pre-drilling the MDF. We all know how much MDF splits. So I drilled some sort of pretty decent holes in it on both sides, just to make sure that I'd got the right drill holes in the right place. And as I said, I've had MDF split on me so many times now, it's ridiculous. Then I offered it up, just drove some screws in, and then realised those screws weren't long enough, so I got a longer one, and then drove all of those in. And again, exactly the same process for both sides. And the screws were there really to sort of hold it straight, although there is a sort of a back piece to it in the fact that it's, you know, it's part of the actual clamp storage cupboard, which you'll see in a minute. But pleased with how that went on. And then I went on to the next stage, which was putting the other side in. Again, no real problems here. And then I moved on. I actually decided to go for these brackets rather than taking it off and sort of fixing it from behind, because of where it is, and it's always going to have stuff on it. I didn't think you'd see the brackets, and they're really good, these brackets. I got them from Lidl, and they're super strong for what they are. So I just thought I'd use the brackets instead, just to make it a little bit more tightly fixed to the cupboard. I just used a piece of block of wood there to make sure they're all straight. So I put brackets on sort of both sides and then fixed them in again, pre-drilling and screwing. I then moved on to this little strip on the front, and that literally is to stop things moving or falling off when I'm opening the clamp storage. It's just literally a little sort of holder, really. And I didn't go to town too much on this. I just wanted something there that would basically stop things falling out.
again, I just screwed all of this in, just drilled and screwed everything. I pre-drilled absolutely everything because, as I said, you know what it's like working with MDF, it splits so quickly. And then when I fit it up, you can see there's a little gap, but as I said, that didn't really worry me. I'd already pre-marked the wall, so that's not just me sort of doing it by eye. I'd already leveled it up and pre-marked it. When I was happy, I just drove the rest of the screws in, both on the top side and on the ones underneath. Again, you can see the brackets there, but when you've got stuff in it, you won't see them, you know, as clearly. And obviously underneath, from where you're standing, pretty much most of the time, you won't see that either. But as I said, I was just happier using those, and it was nice and sturdy. The next thing I did is I went actually through and then filled in all, pre-drilled all the holes and actually attached the piece of wood to the sort of plywood edge. I just wanted to get it in nice and secured before I moved on to the next stage. I didn't go too mad here. I just had enough screws in it that the MDF was sort of attached behind, and it wasn't going to go anywhere really. I then moved on to another one of my 3D printed things. This is just a spanner holder. Again, I'd marked it at the top, used the level, then just marked it and drove it in. Really, really nice and simple, this one. It's a great little file, this one. Again, I got it on Thingiverse. I then went for the piece of wood that's at the bottom, and for this, I decided to put a sort of flat panel to A, hide those slats, and B, also to make them a bit more rigid so that they're all together. So I laid them flat. Again, I didn't use any glue. I literally just drilled and screwed them together to sort of just keep it in one bit. And knowing I was going to put my pull saws on this, it didn't have to be really strong, because obviously when it's driven into the bottom of the cabinet, that's where it will get its strength and rigidity. It didn't need to have it this way, so I just hooked it all together, put in some screws and got it nice and strong. I then offered it up, just connected it to make sure it fitted, and it fits perfectly. You can see there a little chip off of the MDF, which I don't think is going to be a big problem. The next thing I did was put my little file racks, and I did things in this order because I wanted to make sure I'd got enough room at the bottom to put my pull saws in. And this is again another 3D printed thing. You literally just put your files in it, which you'll see in a minute. Really, really basic, really handy. And again, another file I got from Thingiverse. So I just got them all nice and level, and that gave me space to put the files. I then went back to my flat piece of wood, and I laid out where my pull saws were going. It didn't worry that they hung over the bottom because I knew I had enough clearance for them. And then I put in some more little sort of hook holders. These were already in what they were on in the workshop over by the door. Again, just 3D printed little things. I just connected them with 4 small screws, got them all nicely measured out so they're sort of equal distance apart. When I was happy with that, the next stage was just to offer it up, which I did to make sure everything fitted, and I screwed it into place. Really pleased with how it worked out. And then it was time to load it up, which I really enjoy doing, I have to say. Seeing everything go on there and everything fit and have a place and how neat it looked, I was really pleased, as you'll see in a minute. But a place for everything, and I've still got a couple of spare spaces if I want to use them.
So I'm at the end of the project. As you can see, it's finished, and I'm super, super happy with it, which is quite unusual for me to be so positive, but it's turned out exactly as I wanted it to be. I've got great storage up here for my hammers and for my pliers that fit in there. I've got a little shelf, very sturdy shelf. I'm just going to put my glue on that, which will free up a bit more space on the shelf I've got there. I've managed to get all of my spanners, my spanner set on it. I've got my files on it, and I've got my Japanese pull saws at the bottom. So everything exactly as I wanted it to be. It opens, it has put a bit of weight on it, I'm not going to lie, and as you can see, I never got round to putting the clasp on the side, but it is moving now, so I am going to do that. But I'm super, super pleased with it. I just think it's come out exactly as I planned it in my mind, and obviously I sort of freestyle it a bit. I didn't have a drawn plan or anything, but Not a bad effort at all. I'm really pleased, and it's going to be really useful to me. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's video on the Garage Workshop. If this is your first time here, please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. The algorithm is really important to the YouTube channel. I don't understand how it works, but I know it is. So it would be absolutely fantastic if you could do that. Please leave a comment. I respond to all the comments. I love them. If you're a regular viewer, thank you once again for tuning into the Garage Workshop. I hope you've enjoyed it. A couple more videos coming around organisation before we go on to some really good projects I've got coming up. But if you are a regular viewer, thank you so much. Please also don't forget to like and comment. And I will catch you on next week's video on the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.